You see right behind me? That is because of influence. When you talk about an iconic series like Sonic the Hedgehog, you have to ask yourself, what is the most influential Sonic game ever? Is it the first Sonic the Hedgehog game? When you have this conversation, it's hard to avoid talking about Sonic the Hedgehog 1. The reason why Sonic 1 is so influential is because, you know, he probably wouldn't be here unless this game released. But the influence of Sonic the Hedgehog 1 is so much deeper than it's just the first game, bro. You have Sonic, this blue hedgehog with red shoes. The perfect contrast, by the way. This character design alone is probably what kept the franchise afloat when we were dropping games like Sonic 06 and the franchise was on a downturn. As far as the gameplay elements and some of the aesthetics of the series, almost everything in the series can be traced back to the first game. We have tons of gameplay elements such as rolling, Sonic going into a ball when he jumps. That is something that's been in every single game since. And the fact that he can roll into a ball to preserve his momentum, while this isn't a staple of every single Sonic game these days, it's synonymous with the brand. The colorful, aesthetic, vibrant zones such as Green Hill, which has been quote unquote overused in the Sonic franchise in like almost every game. You have the Green Hill aesthetic in Sonic the Hedgehog 1, 2, SA2, Sonic Heroes, Sonic Lost World, Sonic Frontiers. It's literally everywhere you look. The first Sonic the Hedgehog game is what catapulted Sonic and Sega to taking a giant chunk of Nintendo's console market share. Elements like rings, springs, badniks, goalpost signs, going from point A to point B as fast as possible with alternative paths for different skill levels of players, checkpoints, spikes, loop-de-loops. I mean, come on, almost everything from this original game still pops up in the series to this very day. And everything in between that has happened in the Sonic the Hedgehog franchise since can all be traced back to the first game. Some may call it nostalgia pandering, but ultimately the influence that the first game had may be amongst the greatest in the entire series. Whenever it's time to present Sonic the Hedgehog to the widest and most general audience possible, and we're talking about strictly licensing, usually there's some version of Green Hill there. That's because it's the most marketable, and that's because it's the most iconic. And that is simply just a testament to how influential the first game was. I mean, look at that checkered pattern down there. That just screams Sonic. It gave Sega its reputation, it gave it its market share, and it gave it a ton of success. What about the second Sonic game? Sonic the Hedgehog 2 essentially improves everything that Sonic 1 does. I think the game is significantly better. It adds Tails, an iconic sidekick who is seen in almost every game since. It adds the Spin Dash, one of the most iconic moves ever. It adds the Death Egg, and it adds a little bit more of story as well as Super Sonic. So there's a lot of influential elements of Sonic 2 that impact the series today. I think at its core, it's just an improved Sonic 1 with some extra core stuff, as opposed to like global phenomenon that birthed the entire franchise. The first game will always have that leverage. As far as Sonic CD, introduces some core characters like Amy and Metal Sonic, some interesting elements such as time travel, which is also still used in the series. But ultimately, other than like the characters, this game certainly does not carry the same impact as the first Sonic game. Now, as far as Sonic the Hedgehog 3, it's hard not to say that this game is one of the most influential because it introduces Knuckles, an all-time iconic character in the series. Elements of it were adapted for Sonic the Hedgehog 2, the movie. You have the Master Emerald, which has been a major plot point and device used earlier in the series, not so much now, but I think it's going to make a comeback. As far as the actual game itself, like this is widely seen as one of the best 2D platformers ever. Probably the pinnacle and apex of the classic Sonic series in general. Like, yeah, Sonic 1's extremely influential, but 3 is significantly better. You have 3 playable characters, Knuckles' glide ability, Tails' ability to fly, and different routes for each playstyle. Like Tails is the easy mode, Knuckles, you can explore and find some cool things. The best and most experienced players who replay the levels a lot will be able to complete them faster because they know the faster routes. I think the biggest thing though we could take away from Sonic 3 and Knuckles in terms of its influence is story. Angel Island, an iconic set piece, while it's not used as much as it used to be, almost everyone who's interacted with the series knows and loves it. The idea that there's this like evolving narrative surrounded around friendship and betrayal, Sonic going super and fighting in the Doomsday Zone if you get all of the Chaos Emeralds, like using Super Sonic as like that plot device for a true final story. Now that is something that influences the series far beyond a lot of the things that happen in the actual game or its quality, because yeah, it's like one of the best. We also have to talk about power-ups in Sonic 3. The homing attack, it's pretty similar to the fire shield. The bounce attack, pretty similar to the bubble shield. The lightning attack kind of serves as that double jump, which you see in a lot of the boosting games. We can't really say it enough. The classic games are obviously influential, and a lot of the elements in those games still exist in the series today. It's hard to say one has the most influence out of all of them, but I guess you kind of have to go with the first Sonic game. Despite the fact that you could almost put all of them into one, since they all play so similar, but just added their own little bits and pieces to Sonic's rich history. Now, Sonic Adventure is an interesting case. This is Sonic's first true mainline leap into a 3D platform. platformer, and I think it was pretty successful. There are definitely a lot of elements from the classic games that are borrowed and translated pretty well into this game. You have Ice Cap, which features Angel Island. You have the Master Emerald. You have Chaos Emeralds. You have a supersonic boss fight. You have multiple playable characters, and what's interesting about Sonic Adventure 1's multiple playable characters is that all the characters share the same levels. So that philosophy from Sonic 3 with Tails to be the easy route and fly is prevalent in his gameplay as well. There's also some new routes you can take. Same thing with Knuckles. He shares stages with Sonic. There's a lot of different places that you can go to and access using his gliding and climbing ability. In addition to that, this game introduces 6 playable characters with intertwining stories, which was something that was extremely relevant for this decade of Sonic games. Sonic Adventure was certainly the formula for the next decade in the sense that open zone is going to be the formula for the next decade. The greater focus on narrative and plot is something that remains to this day, and one of the most influential aspects is probably the redesign for Sonic. They took his iconic character design, gave him green eyes, longer limbs, made him a little bit more edgy, right? A little bit more cool. And probably most people think that this is the better design. You may not like Sonic games anymore. You may never even played a Sonic game, but that character design, you definitely recognize. So the redesign for all the characters is something that certainly gives Sonic Adventure a case for being one of the most influential games. In addition to that, the adventure gameplay is something that stuck for a while. You have the more open level designs, kind of similar to the classics, that encourage exploration, just this time it's in 3D, so it's translated a little differently. You still have those rolling physics. I mean, it's not like true momentum, but there's certainly something there. If you go down a hill in the ball form, you will gain speed. Get to point A to point B as fast as possible. Platform. Sonic getting on a snowboard and going down Ice Cap, that's in Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but also you see the exact same scene in Sonic Adventure. Sky Chase, which features Sonic and Tails trying to get onto a floating Eggman fortress, that's also in Sonic the Hedgehog 2. A casino zone with pinball physics, don't worry, that was also translated into 3D as well. So you'd be surprised. There's a lot of similar elements from Sonic Adventure and a few of the games that came after it that were directly ripped from the classic games. Knuckles getting tricked by Dr. Eggman was something that was taken from the classics. I feel like to me, Sonic Adventure is the perfect evolution of the classic formula in the 3D space, which Sonic was struggling to do for a while. But is this the most influential Sonic game? Well, how can you talk about this game without talking about Sonic Adventure 2? Sonic Adventure 2 introduced Shadow. He's the most iconic character next to the actual main protagonist. We have Live and Learn as basically the theme song for the entire franchise. By the way, both adventure games do a really good job of introducing different music genres into the Sonic world. You had hip-hop, you had jazz, you had some R&B, you had rock music. You may not like the Sonic game, but you probably like the music. They took the narrative focus that was established in Sonic Adventure and kind of Sonic 3 and Knuckles and took it to the next level. Sonic Adventure 2 is still the greatest Sonic story told to this day. There's a reason why it was adapted for Sonic Movie 3. And speaking of stories, I think one of the most influential things that this game does is that storytelling in Sonic games was never really the same after this one. Everything is kind of downstream from Sonic Adventure 2 when you talk about Shadow the Hedgehog, the Project Shadow lore, the introduction of Chaos Control, Gun being formed in this game, and people kind of using this game as an example to tell Sonic stories in like fan wish lists and things of that nature is probably its biggest impact and influence on the series. This game added rail grinding into the series. That's something that's always been a staple since. We still had the intertwining stories, although that was kind of a Sonic Adventure 1 thing that was established. This game is certainly influential, but I think more so than anything, it's just straight up iconic. Sonic Adventure 1 and 2 as a package, I feel like is kind of how you have to look at it. These two games definitely set the stage for 3D games for the next decade. While Sonic the Hedgehog was always the cool character, the cool mascot, I feel like Sonic Adventure 2 kind of solidified the fact that Sonic is a franchise for everyone. It's not just a baby franchise. There are people that to this day, they may have not played a Sonic game since SA2, they will still look back on that game and be like, yo, that shit was sick. I know that's certainly the case for me. We also have Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. How influential was this game? It did a lot of cool things, like had good OST, it introduced Silver. The climax was pretty sick. The influence of this game is that it influenced people to not play Sonic games, and it killed the adventure formula. So it probably influenced the franchise negatively. But I think another influential game we need to speak about is Sonic Rush. Sonic Rush is a game that just exhibits the energy and style of Sonic. This game had a lot of similarities to the classics, but it had its own modern twist. This game should almost serve as the basis for what a 2D modern Sonic platformer should be, as opposed to what they tried to do with Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1 and 2. The coolest thing about this game is that Sonic's style is greatly translated into the gameplay. The boost helps kind of accurately portray his speed. After all, he's the fastest creature in the universe. You have the trick system, which I think is the coolest thing. When Sonic goes in the air, you can spam the tricks to one, look cool, but also to keep your boost meter up. In addition to how fun it is to get launched up into a spring in this game and spam the tricks, you are also able to kick forward forward or kick up. So you had some cool movement options, but I think the biggest thing that Sonic Rush introduced was the boost gameplay formula. If there's one thing that has been a staple in the series since, and honestly like a genre defining thing, it's the boost formula. We had the classic, adventure, and boost. That's kind of the three major pillars of Sonic. So the fact that Sonic Rush started one of the major pillars just goes to show that this probably is one of the most influential games ever, and its gameplay style is still here 20 years strong. So Sonic Rush, in terms of the gameplay, probably has to be the most influential. It serves as a 20-year running pillar that was translated for the first time in 3D in Sonic Unleashed. You can't talk about Sonic Rush's influence without talking about how it influenced Sonic Unleashed, which kind of served as the mainline 3D inspiration for the games to come. It starts with Rush, but kind of ferments with Sonic Unleashed and turns into a whole nother monster. Not a werehog, by the way. But yeah, Sonic Unleashed took the boost formula and turned it into 3D. That thing that everyone liked in Sonic Rush, yeah, they don't like the adventure formula anymore because the game flopped. Why don't we put it in the 3D games? And it worked. The gameplay style for Sonic Unleashed is, to this day, at least the boosting levels, to be the best that the formula has to offer. It's not only about platforming, it's also about how fast can you react, how cool can you look while doing it. It took Sonic the Hedgehog, the fictional character with all of his canon abilities, and basically translated that into the actual gameplay. It was just so cool. I think the biggest thing about Sonic Unleashed is that it took the leap into 3D, but also took the 2D gameplay and integrated it into that 3D gameplay style. Without the 2D stages, some people would argue that the game is basically a glorified temple run. There's certainly more nuance to that, but the 2D sections, which are probably inspired from Sonic Rush, allow us to slow down the game a little bit and integrate platforming into the level design to break up the pace, and not only that, extend the length of the levels. The biggest problem with Sonic Unleashed is the fact that it had the werehog, but the gameplay style remained. Once other Sonic games flopped and we wanted to return back to form, we got Sonic Colors, another game that in its own right is pretty influential. They said, let's take the werehog style, throw it into the trash where it belongs, and let's just put the parts of the game that people liked and make it the entire game. Kind of genius if you think about it. The biggest things that this game influenced on the next decade of Sonic was the fact that they had lighter stories that were not as intensive. There's no romance and human princesses or whatever. There's no edgy hedgehogs with a gun trying to destroy the planet and aliens and weird stuff and conspiracy theories. It's just Sonic. It's like a Saturday morning cartoon. I can't say I'm necessarily a fan of this, but I understand why it was necessary in 2010, coming off of a lot of bad games. In addition to that, this game introduced the Wisps, which are still used in the series to this day. It introduces the double jump as a core part of Sonic's base moveset without any power-ups, and the Wisps in themselves are also cool little gimmicks and power-ups. So Sonic Colors is certainly influential. It has some original ideas, but it's certainly a product of some of the games that came before it. In the same sense that Sonic 3 Knuckles, while it was revolutionary, it's kind of just built off of the previous classic Sonic games. So as far as its influence, there's a lot, but I wouldn't say this is the most influential game. We also got Sonic Generations. This game is very influential in the sense that they separated classic and modern Sonic and basically created two alternative pillars. Classic Sonic was seen in additional games after in Sonic Mania, Sonic Forces, Sonic Superstars. So the influence of Generations was felt with respect to that. And the fact that we went back to like this nostalgia pandering kind of thing, which can be influenced from the first Sonic game. Going forward, they're like, hey, remember when our series was the top in the entire industry? Green Hill? Yeah, let's keep throwing that in everywhere. So Generations certainly extended that, and they just kind of perfected the boost formula. As far as its influence beyond that, that's really what it is. Other than some of those other things that I mentioned, Generations is more so a product of influence rather than being more influential in of itself. Although technically Shadow Generations was definitely influenced by Sonic Generations. Sonic Forces, you could say, is influential in the fact that because it was a flop, it gave us the era that we have now, and that's really all the good you can say about what it's done for the franchise. The Sonic movies, their influence really can't be understated. We don't get any of this without the Sonic movies, but we're talking about the games. To me, that's a different conversation for a different day. But the final game that has the most influence in the Sonic series, I would say, is Sonic Frontiers. The last true full-blown mainline 3D game. Frontiers is obviously, as of right now, the basis for Sonic's future. In the sense that the adventure games were and the classic games were, we're now kind of in this open zone era. Every game that follows Sonic Frontiers until the next game flops is going to be this open zone formula. The gameplay loop is pretty simple. You platform and run around the open world, which is comprised of basically mini elements of Sonic levels. Do enough of the challenges around the map in order to access the linear stages, which are more traditional Sonic gameplay, and from there, rinse and repeat until you fight the boss and move on to the next island. We already know that open zone is the future because Takashi Iizuka said as much. He wants this to be the basis for Sonic for the next 10 years. The last Sonic game that we got, Sonic and Shadow Generations, also featured a mini open zone. Open zone is kind of just like this natural evolution of what platformer games are going to do. We saw it with Mario. We saw Zelda Breath of the Wild. Like, these mascot characters are going into these open giant environments because the hardware can now handle for that. Sonic Frontiers was seen as one of the most successful games in the franchise. We know that this is going to be the gameplay style going forward, so it's hard to understate Frontiers' impact. Some people people even say that without Frontiers, we wouldn't even have Sonic games anymore because it was so successful. Time will tell though. We still have like 5 years left in this decade, so the story about Frontiers isn't fully written, but as far as I'm aware, the influence can't be understated. So which game out of all these is the most influential? So at number 5 for most influential Sonic games, we're gonna put Sonic Frontiers. I just talked about all the reasons why this is the case. The story is still yet to be written, as I stated before. Like, there's still time for more open zone games to come out, so if we get like 2 more, this can certainly climb up. While open zone in of itself is the main piece that we're talking about, there's elements of the next Sonic games to follow that make them more influential. At number 4, I'm gonna put Sonic 3 and Knuckles. The reason why, despite the fact that it's not necessarily the original classic Sonic game, too much of the history and influence of Sonic can be traced back to this game. Most importantly, like the secret final supersonic boss that was a staple of the series for a while. Knuckles the Echidna was established in the story, and this is where we got the core trio of Sonic, Tails, and Knuckles. The idea that Sonic games would have a little bit more story than some of the other platformer games available at the time certainly traces back to this game. It also just feels like too much of Sonic's history and lore is kind of like established in this game. Plus the multiple playable characters, you really can't go wrong with it. Number 3, I'm gonna go with Sonic Adventure. Too much that was introduced and established in this game is relevant to the series to this day. Fully voice acted and redesigned characters that are still used to this day. This game also had the hub worlds, which you could say is kind of like a basis for Sonic Frontiers. And again, just a lot of Sonic's brand identity was established in this game. I think you can also throw Sonic Adventure 2 in there as like a package deal. I feel like the best of both of these games would create the best Sonic game ever with some modern polish. It feels like leaving out Sonic Adventure 2 would be borderline criminal, and I feel like those two games together is truly how you have to look at it. At number 2, super hot take, I think we're gonna have to put Sonic Rush here. The reason why is because it established the boost formula. Whether you love or hate the boost, and I'm sure that there's some adventure or classic fans that don't like it, you have to admit that this has been the primary gameplay style of Sonic for like the last 20 years. As an adventure fan, that gameplay style has only lasted a couple of years, whereas this one has far outlived it. So I feel like just the introduction of this mechanic alone makes it one of the most influential. If you want to package it together with Sonic Unleashed, that's also fine. It's kind of hard for me to say one or the other because technically Rush was first, but Unleashed was kind of like the 3D version of this, so do with that what you will. Number 2 is definitely like whenever the boost formula started though. Number 1 though, it has to be the first Sonic the Hedgehog game. Every bit of nostalgia pandering or everything that you see from the series pretty much originates from this game. Green Hill, rings, like Spin Dash, Sonic himself, Dr. Eggman, rolling physics, Chaos Emeralds, like pretty much everything comes from this game, and all the licensing and marketing for Sonic, usually elements of this game are present. It's that iconic, it birthed the franchise, it really can't be anything other than number 1. But let me know if you guys agree or disagree.